Looks like we're just waiting on Mr. Pearson. Yes? Ah, there he is. Great. All right, I think we're all back on board. I'd like to reconvene the open session. I have 6:10. And I'd like a moment of silence as we consider the work before us this evening. Thank you. Moving on to our mission statement. Mrs. Clooney, if you could honor us with the statement, please. You're on mute, Mrs. Clooney.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. The mission of Coventry Public Schools is to inspire, support, and challenge all students in an inclusive community to be critical thinkers, effective communicators, reflective learners, responsible individuals, and global citizens.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And just to inform the public, the school committee met in executive session for about 10 minutes, and there were 2 votes taken, one to approve the homeschool request and also to approve the executive session minutes of 12/9/2021. Both of those votes were unanimous and carried 3-0. Moving on to sealing the minutes of the executive session. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that the records of the executive session be kept closed pursuant to sections 42/46/4 and 42/46/5.
I second the motion.
Thank you. And all in favor, you can just raise your hand. Looks like we have 3 yeas. Motion carries 3-0. Moving on to approval of open meetings minutes from 12/20, 1 and 1/13/22. They were in our packet. Is there a motion to approve?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of 12/20/21 and 1/13/22 as presented/amended.
I second the motion.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none or no concerns, all in favor, you can just raise your hand. Looks like I've got 3 positives, so motion carries 3-0. Moving on to the public agenda. So for the public, the attendees and people listening online, the following agenda items are open to the public for discussion. If there's a motion or a vote called, before I call the vote, we'll let the public have their comments or questions before I call that vote. That being said, I welcome everybody to the meeting tonight, and we'll move on to agenda item number 6, which is the budget workshop discussion of the FY23 Coventry Public Schools budget. And I assume, Mr. Levis, you're going to start that.
Yes, I'm going to. I am going to try and share my screen here.
Okay.
If I have that permission, Jim. Okay, here we go. Excellent. So tonight is our first budget workshop. We've made binders. I want to thank Mr. Sands, Mr. DeVerna, and Mrs. Martin for putting together budget binders. We have binders for the council, town council. We have binders for the town administration and for our administrators, and we'll deliver them after this presentation. So what we did is we put together kind of a overview, some of the points we touched before, and then at the very end, we're going to go through just the different sections of our budget binder and see if there's questions from the committee. We know this is preliminary. We have scheduled a meeting for next week. We'll be having a budget meeting, a workshop the next 4 weeks. We have an aggressive timeline. We're still meeting with our staff and figuring out, and we'll go through it in the presentation. There's different dates where we'll get more concrete numbers, such as, state aid and our enrollment. Also staffing needs as we move forward. So with having said that, let me start with the slideshow. If there's any questions you have during this, please feel free. So again, some of this is a review, but I think it's important to go over again. We know that our state aid will be finalized sometimes in mid-March, early April, when the General Assembly votes on it. You'll see fairly shortly, though, that the original amount that was cut, the $700,000, the governor actually level funded, reinstated that. So that's a positive already. Tuition estimates, again, mid-March. Our transportation costs, we would get end of January. We actually have a meeting next week, myself, I think Mr. Cowart and Mr. Hill, our Director of Facilities and Transportation, with Tony Murgo from Ocean State. Health and dental estimates, late March, early April, though Harold is in constant contact with our provider and getting updates in terms of what we think that'll be. Again, out of district, special education costs are ongoing. We have a projection for retirees. I think tonight you'll see that we've budgeted a certain amount, but we're hoping that we get additional retirees, which will help us significantly. And currently, Mr. Sands, Mr. DeVerna are meeting with the principals. They had submitted, all the meetings have taken place initially, and now he's meeting to really refine the requests from the buildings. So what you're going to see tonight is where we're at so far, but we expect over time to refine these requests. So again, some of the preliminary assumptions, and this is where we talk about that the governor has effective January 20th, and I believe I shared that with the committee, and that's, I believe, in our packet also, the budget, but he level funded education. We had a over $700,000 decrease in state aid. So that's already significant as we start the process. We're putting a local appropriations by 5% based on what we have now. That's where we're starting. That does not include the maintenance requirement. We'll talk about that later on. Medicaid revenues are on target at this time. We're going to be working with some consultants to help us really maximize that. That's an area we think we can continue to maximize our revenue. We're still looking at consistent other revenues, including, and I put that asterisk again there because that was this discussion about not funding cell tower revenue. We don't have any resolution on that yet. And then use of fund balance, which will include $200,000 for school lunch. And we provided that at our last conversation where I believe I went through the memo. We talked about how fund balance isn't appropriate. It's, in terms of UCOA. It's not ideal, but it's something if we need to do that many districts utilize. Other assumptions, salaries, and that's something that's going to be ongoing. You're going to see tonight that we put just the total number of salaries, and we'll give you all the details as we're working with the principals next week. We should have by Monday, I think Mr. Sands and I talked about having those details. So you'll see all the details specific to personnel that will be we'll share with you for our budget. Again, retirement replacement right now, it's a $171,000 savings of the district. I think we put in, I believe it was 6 retirees, and we project that we hire step 5. We believe that number could go up. Benefits, through conversations, we projected at 7%, but I think if you look at the last 3 years, we had a 3% increase. We didn't have an increase last year in 7%. So, with healthcare, I think 10% over the last 3 years is we're pretty fortunate. Purchase services, we're looking at 3%. transportation contract, out of district tuition. And again, as you know, that out of district tuition is always a wild card. You know, that can, you know, we look at charter schools, our vocational programs that we're paying for, pathways, and then we always have the opportunity for, you know, a special ed student could move in that, you know, for them to do it, for us to address their needs is significant. So, you know, it's we do our best, but that can be there can be variables throughout the year on that. We talked about this last time, equipment, because of the $432,000 to use Chromebooks. So again, one of the areas in talking with Rhode about using our COVID funds was if we can demonstrate how it's going to benefit also the local, you know, our budget in terms of offsetting local appropriation, they encourage us to do that. So we continue to do that as we're planning to use the American Recovery Plan funds. And we reduced energy by $200,000 due to the contract we have for natural gas and electricity. Again, some of this is stuff we went over, I believe, at the 20th when I presented to the council. I think it's important enough to kind of frame the conversation tonight. So again, student data, we continue to monitor to make sure we capture all our students for that March 15th deadline, which is so crucial. Mr. Sands is working with Mr. Wilson to look at special education, trying to maximize our reimbursements. That we get a reimbursement for high-cost special education students, and we need to, there's a formula that they use, and we need to try to make sure that we capture all the services. There's a threshold that students must reach for us to get reimbursed. We think we can maximize that, and we talked about Medicaid. Again, CTE course offerings. We have an exciting meeting coming up, I believe Friday. I had mentioned it before. We're meeting with Envision. In fact, Jay Longley's on tonight. He's going to be presenting with Mr. Murphy a little bit later on, but we have a meeting about actually getting a certification around you know, cybersecurity, hacking. But it's an entry-level certification that'll allow our students to go into the workforce in cybersecurity right out of high school. So we're looking forward to that, you know, bringing that to Coventry. We'll be the only district in the state that has that. Again, looking at other opportunities to increase revenue. We're talking about, I was at the transition program yesterday, talking to them about looking, you know, they came and did a wonderful presentation to the school committee about moving offsite. We believe that there's opportunities for us to tuition in, and we're looking at all the other opportunities we have throughout the district to maximize revenues and tuition. And then finally, we just, you know, I mentioned earlier, the use of ESSER II and American Recovery Plan funds. We talked about our vans, Chromebooks, and we'll be coming forward to you about high quality curriculum materials. That's an area that, you know, Ms. Anzalone, Mr. Coward have been working with our curriculum team. It's another opportunity too for us to include our teachers in this conversation. You know, we've provided a lot of resources to students that are struggling learners through, you know, in our core curriculum. We need to look at like advanced placement courses and see what kind of materials we can provide to support those. So we're, you know, again, looking at being more equitable in terms of that. And this is an appropriate use of our ESSER II funds, American Recovery Plan funds. And it'll offset the local appropriation because these are resources we would buy with local, you know, and state tax dollars. We're fortunate, we're in a position where all of our contracts for next year are settled. Again, we look at course requirements, we look at enrollment, and that determines, you know, in terms of elementary programs. We've created some programs to address student needs so that we've reduced the number of students that have to go out of district to receive services. And at the high school, it's really around course selection, course requirements, and enrollment. And so, you know, that's an ongoing process where we'll take a look and see how we can best utilize the resources we have. But what students are looking to take, you know, what courses do we need to increase staffing, or where do we need to decrease staffing? Again, I talked about the principals. I'm meeting with Mr. Sands as we speak, and we'll refine those budgets for next week. This is, again, these are redundant from last time I presented, but looking at all of our software, curriculum, and equipment costs. We're also looking at our purchase service agreements to see if there's other programs. And I just mentioned we had created a Strive program, these STRIDE programs, where students with significant needs, social, emotional, are able to get services in their own school district instead of having to be serviced out of district. And you know, I'm going to thank the special ed program for doing that. So this is our budget. It's in the packet. Oh, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say, all these documents are on our website. They're under, if you go to the department tab and look at business and finance, they're all listed. These documents are listed there, plus the presentations, the December 20th presentation and tonight's presentation. So for the public, again, it's the departments, business and finance, and they're right there on that page, and they're accessible. So this is our budget as it stands tonight. So you can see that it's a 5% increase. We do use the fund balance. We're looking at a $700,000 use of fund balance, which is much less than we used, if you remember last year, the fund balance. So everything is as it stands tonight. But this is something that will fluctuate as we go through this process over the next 4 weeks. If you notice, the maintenance requirement on the FY23 preliminary budget is not included in terms of our budget. In terms of looking at it, we're going to look at how the town will fund that. We had a long conversation about the bond and our needs, and so we'll have to have some difficult conversations with the town. I know I've listened to some of the council meetings. I know there's been requests, or I've received requests about how they could help us in terms of capital. We'll be coming back next week with at least a preliminary capital improvement plan, and tying that into our capital list. And again, this is going to be, I believe, a challenging budget season, and not so much for the budget, but I think some of the conditions that we're dealing with right now. But again, this is as of tonight. But I just want to highlight that maintenance requirement that we haven't included it. We're going to need support from the town, and we know that if it's not funded, that they will take the housing aid, and that's not what we're trying to set up here. So that's why I just want to really highlight that tonight. I look forward to having those conversations, like I said, with both the school committee and in the town council. So the last page is really looking at our budget overview. I know I believe you just received the budget books a few days ago. They're preliminary. It's what we know right now. We know that, just to go through the format, there's a budget calendar. We have the revenue listed. There's a summary budget, which we just went over and looked at. As I said, with the personnel, the detail will be provided for our February 2nd budget workshop, which will be at 6 o'clock. It's virtual. Then we have the section on non-personnel. And then I didn't add the presentation. We'll make sure that we send a whole bunch of copies of the two presentations, put them in. This is a format that we've used. Ms. Mangiarelli I really was instrumental in putting this together. I know Mr. Sands, Mr. DeVerner have still continued to work with Ms. Mangiarelli. We appreciate her support, but I believe that they've adopted this and think this is the best format to present. So I know I ran through that. Most of what we talked about previously was what we had discussed on the 20th. I think that kind of frames the conversation moving forward. So I guess I would open it up to the school committee. If there's questions on anything that I just spoke about, or do you have any questions specifically? I have, Mr. Sands is here, Mr. DeVerner to answer questions if it's anything specific. Again, we know we just gave this to you a few days ago. We'll get into it much more depth as we continue to have our meetings. So we know personnel is the biggest part of our budget. Some of that won't be refined till early spring, even though we know, we'll have meetings with the high school to look at course selection and course needs. But we know that we have to have a budget to the town, a summary budget at least, by the end of February. So we're going to have the school committee vote on that. So with that, I will open it up to turn it back to you, Ms. Patno. And if there's questions specific, again, knowing that tonight is very preliminary and knowing that we have a meeting next week.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Levis. Are you going to stop sharing your screen maybe? I don't know if we need that still. It's hard. That's better. So I can see everybody. Thank you. So I guess we'll start with Mr. Pearson. Do you have any questions for the superintendent?
Just a couple. Again, we just got the binders, so I don't have any detail-oriented questions. Two questions and a request. First question is maybe one question. I'll put them together. As part of our budget process, there's other additional information we expect as well, or at least I do. So the first piece of information is our fiscal audit. Do we have an update of when the fiscal audit will be available? We're 6 months into the process, and it seems like for the past couple of years, this is taking longer than normal.
So I can tell you that, and we'll talk a little bit about it later on in the due to, due from, but if we can't come up with the fund balance and an agreement, that's going to hold up the process. And I want to be clear that, we're not trying to hold up that process. And again, I'll talk about that. There is an agenda item where I'll talk about that. So I believe we had an extension, Mr. Sands, to get information to them. I believe it was January 31st. That
the extension's actually till February 28th. So
okay. February 28th.
So our whole process was to end by the 31st
of January. Okay.
Yeah.
So we have an extension from the Auditor General to February 28th. So, that I think answers some of your question.
Yep, that answers the financial audit portion of it. So we won't have it by the time we do our preliminary vote, but maybe afterward.
Mhm.
Hopefully it doesn't uncover anything we'd have to be too concerned with anyway. The second question is regarding the performance audit. I know that this is more on the town side as running the project, but we have been cooperating. I know your administration and I've been interviewed, and I'm sure other committee members have been interviewed. I don't remember the delivery date. Do we know what the anticipated delivery date is for the performance audit?
Yeah, so what I can tell you is that I've been in contact with Mr. Pennington several times. He's been very supportive. We were supposed to have a steering committee meeting a couple of weeks ago to get it kind of an update, and that's been put off till next Monday. So after next Monday's meeting, and it is on the agenda tonight, I believe, for me to give an update on the performance audit. But after our steering committee meeting Monday, I believe it's Monday afternoon at 4 o'clock, we probably will have a better idea of what the timeline is. For instance, we're still working on a survey to go out to the employees, and that might be finalized tonight or tomorrow. Initially, that survey was going to go out and wanted it to return by like February 2nd. So the fact that there's been some delays and with COVID, and so my long-winded answer is I'll have a better idea after next Monday, and I can share that as part of this budget workshop process, because that was part of the reason of doing it, was to come back and support the requests.
Absolutely. And so those are the only questions I have at this time. The request I have is the request I make every year. I'll make it again. If possible, I'd like to see a salary supplement added to our available documents.
Okay, I believe that's what's going to be added under personnel next week. I think
Perfect.
that's what I meant to say. So I probably didn't articulate well enough, but that detail will be in there. It's
Okay.
just, we're still meeting with the principals, and they're working feverishly to do this work. And I've sat through Zoom meetings, listened. So we'll have that. Mr. Sands said that he'd get something to me Monday, and we'll make sure that we share that with you immediately. So
All
you'll
right,
have
that sounds good. Great. Thank you. That's all I have for now.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Mrs. Colonian, anything?
I don't have any questions at this time.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any. I have one question about the presentation. I just didn't understand. I think it was maybe slide 3 that said the governor's budget was basically leaving us harmless. But then there was another sort of FY22 budget was supposed to be the same, but then there was an increase of 4,000 something. I was just wondering where that came from.
Yeah, that was an increase in, hold on one second, I'll get it for you.
Okay. Not that it's a lot of money in,
The
in
bottom
the
line,
greater,
yeah,
in the greater scheme of.
No,
finance.
it's part of, it's part of the, it's part of the quadratic equation where one
okay.
area did go up
All
to
right.
22,000 from, it was the non-public transportation offset.
Oh. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I was kind of curious where that came from. It didn't really matter, but.
Yeah, that's where it
Okay,
came from.
thanks. Okay,
You're
great. And yes, again, this is all preliminary, so we expect, obviously, to have more questions on next Wednesday when we do the actual budget workshop. So thank you all for all this hard work. I know you're working feverishly on it, like Mr. Levis said, and it'll be nice to see more information from the individual principals and what they have been requesting and all that. That's always helpful to see what they're requesting and what we ultimately will be able to recommend, the budget director will be able to recommend. So thank you for that. Before we move on to the next agenda item, I would like to throw it out to the public. If anybody has any questions for the superintendent, please raise your hand and we will bring you in.
We don't have any hands.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Okay, then I think we can move on to number 7, which is the Rhode Island Student Survey, discussion and approval. And I know you can start it, Mr. Levis.
yeah, I will start, and then we have Caitlin Bianco and Dana DeVerna, who, full disclosure, is Chris DeVerna's better half. So, so this is something we talked about. If you remember, chronologically or historically, I had a lot of concerns several years ago, brought them up. Mr. Anderson talked about that. Fast forward last year, we had a conversation with the Rhode Island student RISA. What does it stand for again? I apologize, Dana. Rhode Island
Student Survey,
No, Student Assistant, the organization.
RISAS. Oh,
RISAS.
yeah.
It's Rhode Island Student Assistance. I don't know what the S stands for. Help me here, Dana. Trying to pull it out.
I think it's services, Rhode Island
Services.
Services.
So we had a presentation talking about this, and we decided that there was a couple of questions we were concerned about. It was really around suicide, and they allowed us to take that out. And we also talked about how it helped fund, it gives data, it helps fund the state, but it also helped us. We were able to receive through a couple of different surveys, we've received support with the student assistance counselor, not only at the high school, but now we were able this year to have a student assistance counselor at no cost to Coventry at the middle school, which is great. They've been incredible resources. They've done presentations for us before. So I'm coming before you, with that. I did highlight an area that we're going to ask. It's the red highlight around the suicide that I'm going to ask them to remove, because the concern is that if somebody thinks they're reaching out and sharing that they've attempted suicide, thought about it, but this is anonymous, there's no way for us to help those individuals. Again, the survey is an opt-out. People have a right. There is a letter we send out. I believe there's a letter that'll go out, and so I'm asking, again, like we did last year, I'm asking for the school committee to support this. It's been a wonderful program for us. I think the information, like I said, does help the state, helps us get funding, and we're definitely benefiting from it. Not only from our staffing, and that also includes the services we get from Dana and Caitlin, but just the programs that have been brought to our schools and working with our students. And as we know, priority right now is social emotional well-being, not just our students, our staff, of everybody in our family. So I'm asking, again, we've been through this, we've talked about it. I'm asking for your support. Parents have a right to opt out. We're not going to force a student to do it. And there are forms that if we agree that, I need to send the agenda, the state is through BUDA, which is Behavioral Health, Hospitals, and Developmental Disabilities. And I have to note that we have to share with them that we've discussed in the agenda, the school committee chair has to sign off on a form, which is in your packet, and the superintendent does. So with that, both Dana and Caitlin are here to answer any questions. But I want to thank them. They're going to do a presentation afterwards too, just to tell you all the amazing work that's been going on through them and partnering with our schools, the Substance Abuse Task Force. But they've done amazing work, and I don't know how we would function. There's so much that they do, that they provide that is not funded by local and by the school department. So I just want to thank them for being here. And again, if you have any questions for them or any questions for me, please let me know.
Thank you, Mr. Levis. I guess we'll start with Mr. Pearson. Do you have any questions for any of the people involved here?
No questions at this time.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Kalunian.
I do not have any questions.
Okay, I had one in our packet, and I'm not sure if it was why it was highlighted, but there's several things that are highlighted in yellow. So I was just wondering what that is.
So those
Yeah.
are, I had the same question because I'm thinking,
Okay.
what are you doing here? Sending me this highlight. Those are questions that have been added this year.
I wondered if that were true. Yeah.
The red
Okay.
were questions that I'm asking them, the red, it's just one area, but I'm asking them to delete. I spoke about just previously.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted you to know, Mr. Levis, that sometimes, maybe it's just me, but your volume cuts in and out, and we're able to hear you, but maybe you need to get right there on top of your computer. I'm not sure, but it seems like you're cutting in and out. So
That could be a good thing.
no. So before I let these two lovely ladies go, I'm going to ask the attendees if there's anyone who has a question for either Dana or Caitlin, Mrs. DeVerner or Mrs. Bianco.
Doesn't look like we have any takers.
It looks good. I do want to thank you before you guys, you ladies, can leave if you'd like for the evening. And I do want to, again, thank you, like Mr. Levis said. We look forward to a future presentation about the data and what you found.
It's
Madam Chair,
Yes.
they're presenting next.
Oh, they are. Oh, I thought they were yet to present. Oh,
yeah,
And we're just going to do a brief little overview of some of the stuff that we've done in collaboration with the school department and what we've done in the schools.
okay. Oh, that's fine. So we didn't have the presentation in our packet, or we did?
there is no, there wasn't. I don't know.
Okay,
what
so
So-
I'm off. I did hear
Sorry.
Mr. Levis say that about the presentation, but I thought it was going to be at a later date. So, hey, okay, fine, go for it.
Yeah, we just have a couple slides that we could show real quick if
We have
Caitlin
to
wants
make a motion on the last thing
Oh.
first.
Yeah, it has to be voted.
You want to do that now or after the presentation?
No, this
You
is,
wanna do it now?
we need to do that now because
Yeah.
this is
Okay.
a separate agenda item.
Hey, I'm glad you guys
Madam
are here
Chair?
to keep me on task. Yes.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the Rhode Island Student Survey as presented / amended.
Second the motion?
Any further questions from the committee or from the public? We didn't have any takers, so. All in favor, you can just raise your hand. So it looks like we have 3-0 on that, and motion carries. I should read my agenda because the next agenda item is number 8, which is you guys, so. I
Always.
had a busy day.
No,
Okay,
thank you. Yeah, no, we just wanted to come on briefly and just talk about some of the stuff that we've been doing in the schools and then in conjunction in the community with the police, with the school department. So, Caitlin, are you able to share? Perfect. All right, yeah, so Caitlin just put together some photos with some stuff that we've been doing. So once, this was right before COVID came in, we were able to do a presentation at the high school for families where we bring in a mock bedroom and show where some students can potentially hide some substances and kind of how to open up the eyes to parents on, what to look for and what some of the trends are and how to do that. So that's always well received. So that's open, that we're able, obviously COVID help, with COVID, how that goes, but we can go into anywhere in the community and have this event. It's basically only for parents. Children aren't supposed to see it, but we can do it anywhere, at a library, at the teen, we can do it wherever you need to, which is a great program. And then this year we just did a vaping presentation at the middle school, where every student at the middle school got our presentation. We did 12 sessions of it in 2 days. And we can present some data once we go through it, because we have something called eye clickers. So every student there participates, and we get some of their data right there during our presentations about where they think people are vaping, how they get them. And it's interesting to see the difference between the 6th grade, the 7th grade, and the 8th grade. So you can kind of really see where the trend is, so that that data helps us for our work and how we can help the students more. And it's interesting for the teachers and for administration and for the community in itself. So we'll get that together for you. So we just did that in November. And then we worked closely with the schools, helped us make some cards, and we delivered them to the seniors center to give out to residents during Christmas time. This was a little tougher. So that we try to work with some of our young children. And then we also have been working with the high school and middle school. In the high school, we worked with VASA, which is a program that's run there. And then we worked with a student council in the middle school. And this October, we got 100 pumpkins, and we had the student council, and those kids put positive messages on them about either mental health. A lot of them were anti-drug messages. And then the SRO at the time that was there, we delivered them to every teacher's desk. So when they got to school in the morning, they had a pumpkin on their desk, just to it's just like something simple like that. The kids got involved, the teacher smiled, and it just brought conversation. So, and some of the kids did a fabulous job on that. So that was a really fun activity, because the student council right now, the middle school, has about 70 kids in it, which is amazing. So we're trying to utilize them as much as possible, because they're really excited to do a lot of stuff. So they've been great to work with. And then, the fun stuff that we've been doing in collaboration with the school department, thankfully, is we were able to put on 4 events starting in the spring that were completely free and open to anyone. So the first one we did was Sandlot at Pierce Field. Movie night, we had popcorn, waters. Throughout all the events too, we also utilized the National Honor Society kids at the middle school, if they wanted to come and volunteer to get their community service hours, to try to get them involved. So we had about 80 kids. That was the first event that we've ever done into the community like this. So we were pretty happy with 80 people. So that went well. So that's something we'd like to continue to do. And then we tried then we had a safety day, which was awesome. We had the state police had a rollover. We gave out bike helmets. We gave out, the Rockwell was there. The fire marshal was there. We had about 300 people there for the 3 hours that it ran. And it was fabulous. We had the hot dogs from the food service. What's the food service called? The company. Sedesco. Thank you. Been a long day. Yeah. So it was fabulous. Everyone had a great time. Hot, but it was great. And then we had the next event was an art and music night, which was something that almost had to get canceled due to the weather and things like that. But we wanted to be able to showcase some kids' art. So we came, people painted. And it was still a fun time. A lot of families came again. Everything was free. They got to take whatever they made home. So that was nice. And then we had a carnival in August. About another 300 people came, where there was games, they had giveaways, there was food. It was great to see kids running around having a good time. We have community partners that come to all these as well, so they can give out their information about their services and what they offer for the community. Again, it's just, we had a balloon guy there, like just everything. People were just shocked everything was free. And it was nice to see everyone out and having a good time, not having to worry about costs, letting them run around and just be able to leave with things. So it was fabulous. And lastly, which was probably, I have to say, one of my favorite ones, was a winter wonderland. We had over 500 people come. Lori Ferguson, I know, was on here. Yes, hi. So we worked together on this, and we utilized almost every program that the high school has, between the culinary, made cupcakes that the kids could decorate for free. We had cosmetology doing nails and face painting. We had, they made these cutouts so you could put your face in it and take photos with the kids. Like, I mean, everything. The ROTC was there. You were able to make wreaths, ornaments. Santa Claus was there. There was a caricature. There was story time that the high school kids read to the kids. It was just, there was family there for hours. They were leaving with bags of stuff. They had shirts that high school kids made up. They were fabulous. Like, I can't get enough of how Lori organized that, and all the kids that came, and they just had a fabulous time. And along with, Mr. Levis was there, Mr. Sands was there. It was a great community event. And I can't thank the school department enough for allowing us to giving us some help with that, because the community loved it. So moving forward, we'd like to do another couple events next year. Probably about 3 a movie night again, and then possibly tying together the safety day and the carnival. And then this Winter Wonderland, which was also this was at Camp Westwood. So all the little cabins were decorated. So it was a nice event. So Caitlin, in case I kind of just went through everything that we've just done, I might have missed a lot, but in a nutshell, that's just some of the stuff we've been trying to do with the community, just to help a lot with the mental health aspect. We're still doing some education on substance stuff, but I just wanted to share some of the more fun stuff that we've been able to do and kind of help the kids out a little bit. So if anyone has any questions.
Thank you so much for that presentation. I recognized a lot of the events, not that I went to them, but I saw them on our Facebook page for the schools, on every, other community, like from Twitter, whatever. So they were very well attended and advertised. So I'm really happy about that. Mr. Pearson, did you have any comments that you'd like to share?
I also, saw a lot of these events posted on social media, and have been thinking these are great to see going on, and I'm glad the attendance has been a lot of people have been coming. So thank you for presenting this and kind of giving us an overview, and definitely support this moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Mrs. Colonian.
I echo Mr. Pearson's comments. I think this is a wonderful thing. Just seeing the kids and everybody interacting, it's nice. And, with everything that's going on, this is a great, boost for morale. And I think it's wonderful. So, kudos.
And before I let the attendees comment, I want to thank you again for all the hard work. And I want to thank all of the community partners, including the public schools, all of the personnel that helped with this and made it possible, all of our students. It makes your heart warm, and to see all that kind of sort of team effort to make something worthwhile for parents, kids, whatever. So again, thank you so much for all of the organization and, getting the community partnerships and the funding to let this happen. So, and doing so many wonderful things, even like giving community service hours to our high school students. So, again, wonderful, wonderful presentation.
Mr.
Mr. Levis, yes.
I just want to say,
Sure.
We meet every month. So Dana and Caitlin and sometimes Kelsey from the CCAP, we meet on a regular basis, and they just have so many ideas. They put so much effort. But, we've always talked about the well-being of not just our students and our staff, but our families. And I think that was a priority that, I was at, many of those events, and just to talk about the winter, I saw families come in with, grandparents and parents and babies in car seats, and the fact that all these activities were free, and food, and the culinary arts students were making cupcakes with kids, and we had a hot chocolate station, and they were making wreaths, and the ROTC were there, and we had chorus there. It was just amazing, and it was free, and it was you saw from like birth to our senior citizens. And I think what we've talked about is, to continue these events. We may not do 4 every year. I think we've talked about doing maybe 2 or maybe 3. But I think it's just, this is what a community is about. And you talked about all the partners. I mean, there were so many different organizations that participated, but again, if it wasn't for Dana and Caitlin doing all this work, and I have to thank Mr. Sands too, because some of the
100%.
funding, we supported the funding. He worked with them to make sure that, it was cost effective, and yet it was just a great, I don't think people know sometimes the work behind the scenes. But I got to say, everybody that went was so appreciative of these events. So again, I just want to thank them. They've been incredible partners, and I can't imagine what it would be like without having them. So thank you, Dana. Thank you, Caitlin.
No, I mean, I thank you for everyone in the community to open us with open arms when we came and being supportive of everything. Sometimes people have a hard time getting into the schools and trying to get stuff. And we're in the middle school once a week trying to help some of the kids there. And anything we've asked has been, nothing. We've worked at the high school a lot too. So I just appreciate the openness and the willingness to work with us to try different things, sometimes to be a little creative to help these kids. Thank you.
Great. So again, if there's anybody in the public or on the panel that would like to make any comments, please just raise your hand and we'll let you speak.
No hands are going up.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Caitlin and Dana, you're more than welcome to stay, or you're more than welcome to leave as well. So again, thank you so much for.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
We really appreciated your presentation and your, so glad that, we were able to have this service in Coventry. So
Awesome.
all this wonderful work. So
Thank
thank you
you.
so much.
Bye.
All right. Okay. All right, I guess we can move on to number 9, which is the Coventry High School course additions, changes, modifications, discussion and approval. I see we have Mrs. Maycumber on, and Mr. Levis, did you want to start it? and
Just say
move
Ms.
over?
Ferguson's here also. So
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
that's okay.
I saw Mrs. Ferguson.
no, that's okay. So I appreciate them coming. There's most of these are course name changes, and there is one addition of a course, and then there's changing the CTP program to a PE pathway, and I think Ms. Ferguson can talk about that. So there are some other CT changes that will be made, I think, at a later date. I spoke to Ms. Bowden about it. They had shared a document with me, and we'll come at another time to talk about those. But you have this information in your packet.
Yep.
So I'll turn it over to both Ms. Maycumber and Ms. Ferguson, if you just want to highlight the changes that are going to take place. And, Laura, if you want to start off with the
sports medicine.
Yeah, if you want to explain the justification on that.
So the sports medicine has never been approved by the CTE board because they were on a hiatus for approval on that. We put it forward when we initially started the sports med program, but we didn't have a full sequence of courses at that time. And so they didn't approve it at that time. And then we were trying to build it. So it was going to take, they wanted a full sequence of courses, a full cohort of students to go through that sequence. So we were at that this year. This year is the year that a full cohort would go through that program, but they're not approving programs right now. I think they're going to start again in February. So in the meantime, we've had an opportunity to try to build this program and, make it a pathway. The main issue that I had from a CTE standpoint was the teacher has to be CTE certified, and they have to have a kinesiology degree, and they have to work in the field for a minimum of 3 years with the bachelor's in kinesiology. So that criteria was just introduced this year with the change of the update of the health standards. So we don't have that in place to go forward with approval for a CTE program here. And at this time, we have like 2 sections are in PE. We have 1 in science. We have, 1 in health. And it really isn't a true CTE program because it really needs to be all CTE. So it's very difficult to have like a couple of courses in PE. And no offense to the PE teachers, but they're not CTE teachers. So they come at the program from a different lens. They really don't understand the work criteria goes along with it. So we really haven't been able to strengthen that program the way it is right now. If we want to move forward with the sports med program, then I have to make some changes, which, we're looking at now. And that's how we would do it for a CTE program. But in the meantime, the PE department put forward a proposal to have a sports med pathway in their department because I don't know why. They just felt that they wanted to have their own courses and have it their own way. So, they're moving forward with theirs. I have to do things on my part to make it an actual CTE program. And so they are moving forward, which I think is a great idea to just keep it going so that we don't lose the fact that we have a sports med program. And then as we move along and as we strengthen it to follow the CTE standards, then we can move forward with program approval in a couple of years. I hope that makes sense. Brooke, does it make sense?
Yeah, it made sense to me. I don't, yeah, I know it does.
I know it's hard because there's so many, having a CTE program is so different than just having a course. There are so many things that we have to make sure that we include that align with the CTE board standards. And so it's just a different process than just developing a bunch of courses and then calling it something. So we'll get there, but we have to get there the right way.
Lori, the intent is though to at least my understanding is that we want to keep it going. We can't keep it going as a CT, but the intent is for us to make this a CT program at a later date.
Yes.
Approved, so we can tuition students in.
Correct. And I still have, students from the middle school are still applying. We still will have that program for them next year. We'll have a course. So that we certainly intend to keep that going.
And this is one of the alignments in terms of the pathway approval. Like we can have our own internal pathways. Rhode has allowed that, and that's what we're doing here, as opposed to the pathways that still have to be approved by the CTE board.
Correct. Yes.
And that's our intent, is to keep it going, keep students staying in the program. It still can address their needs, but our goal is to meet the requirements, work with the CTE board and get this approved as a pathway, but that one where we can also allow students from other districts to take it. So that's why it's coming before you tonight.
Okay. Do you want me to go on with the high school changes?
Before you start, Brooke, I think it might be more helpful if the committee asked questions to Laurie about that particular program. So I just want to settle that. And then, so Mr. Pearson, did you have any questions?
Nope. The explanation was clear. I understand what we're doing. So thank you for the explanation.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Mrs. Kalunian, anything?
I agree. I totally understood what she was saying and why it's changing.
Oh, good. Okay, great. Thank you.
So I have one question. You mentioned something for it to be a bona fide CTE program that's approved, something about kinesiology and having that certification or whatever. Is anyone on staff present that's present now interested in doing that? Yeah.
Well, that's what we would have to see. If they would be interested in pursuing the CTE pathway certification, but it is a full year of intense coursework. So, we would probably be able to pick up the cost of that with some grant money that they have been issuing for CTE certification, but it is an intense full year program. But
Okay.
we'll see if they want to.
All right, thank you. That was my only other question. Okay, Mrs. Maycumber.
Okay, so some of our other courses, we just have some name changes for some social studies courses. They have a new curriculum. They've kind of changed the order and also some of the content that they teach in those courses. So they wanted to rename the courses to match what the content is now and the order. So American and Gov 1 will now be called US History 1. American Gov 2 will be US History 2. And American and Gov 3 will be called America and the World. There's also an elective that they have that was Sports in America Identity, and they changed the name for that to be Sports and Society. So they're really just name changes to reflect the content. Any questions on that? Well, let me keep going. Let me go into the business and computer tech. So there is legislation that passed in 2021 that all kids starting with the class of 2024 have to take a semester of financial literacy. So we are proposing that we change our personal finance class to be called financial literacy, just to reflect that that change in the legislation. And also, we had proposed the technology applications change to computer science because there has been some discussion at the state level of computer science becoming a requirement, a graduation requirement. And so we want to be ready for that if that does pass. So those names would change. And then a new course that we are looking to add that we are adding is yoga and mindfulness. The kids will, excuse me, will be taught by the PE department. Students will receive a PE credit if they take this class. So, we have, we have kids who take yoga at our school during advisory. We also have kids who, don't really love.
Mrs. Maycumber, we're having, Mrs. Maycumber. Mrs. Maycumber, yes.
Activities
That,
to do something during that time that will help them, PE teachers in yoga, they can teach a basic.
I think we may have lost her completely. She must have had an internet problem.
I know what she was saying about the at least the yoga.
The yoga is the yoga thing.
That's a new course. It's but it's going to be done through the PE department. We have a lot of students, and she was talking about advisory. I don't know if you back.
Are you back with us?
Yeah, I'm not doing it on purpose. I promise. Yeah, so I was just saying that we have a lot of kids who have expressed a ton of interest in yoga. We have our phys ed department. We have 2 teachers who really would like to teach this course. And we are also looking to get them trained. So Don and I have been speaking a little bit about some programs and some trainings that we could possibly send them to. And we're doing course selections right now, and there's a lot of buzz about this course. So kids are very interested.
Cool. Yeah, sorry we lost you, but you came back. So, so I don't know if there are any questions from the committee. Mr. Pearson, do you have anything?
Yes, I do. So of course, on the one that was broken up a lot, question about the yoga program. It's interestingly enough, there was a article that came out about this not too long ago that I was reading about yoga programs and their increasing popularity across the country, whereas previously school districts were very hesitant to incorporate or start up a yoga course because of some of the constitutional ramifications. So therein lies my question to whomever can answer. Has this proposal gone through a legal review to ensure that the spiritual aspect of a yoga program is not in violation of the Constitution? We don't want to run into a program where the young Satanists come up with a jogging program that we have to incorporate because we've put together a yoga course. So that's my question.
No, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know this program, right? So this is being done through the PE, but I know the other programs that we've done at the school are not spiritual based, but I can get Mr. Anderson's opinion. But I think in terms of what's been driving this hasn't been a spiritual connection. It's been just about relaxation.
The entire description, but it's more than that though. The description on the sheet to add the course does talk about things like mindfulness,
Right.
and that's not really described well. So I'm cautious and hesitant. And how does that mindfulness cross into spirituality? And are we really, putting together, something?
Yeah.
Yoga is traditionally based in Hinduism. It's steeped in it. So again, there's lines that we have to be very careful not to cross here. And I'm just asking for some assurance that we're covered.
I'll make sure that we get a legal opinion on it. I know that, and I don't want to open another can of worms. We talk about mindfulness a lot in terms of education, but it has nothing to do with anything spiritual based. So, but I will get Mr. Anderson to okay this before we go forward with it. I mean, I would say conditional on your approval tonight, but I will come back and follow up. We can have more of a detailed conversation with Brooke and Mr. Anderson and myself. So that I will do.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Mrs. Colonian, anything?
Yes. Number one, I do practice yoga, and whereas there is some spirituality to it, you don't really have to feel that the mindfulness, and even my doctor tells me, be mindful, be present in the moment. And that's basically how I read mindfulness. It's just being present in the moment and not, being off in la la land, being connected with your body, basically. But anyway, that's I think that's great. It's an awesome, we've had many people in our yoga classes, for, young adults, and they really enjoy it. It's great exercise, and it really does, keep you focused. My question is, you're changing the name from personal finance to financial literacy and technology applications to computer science to align with these courses that are required. Do they have the same criteria as the required courses?
Do they have the same criteria as the required courses?
Yeah, they pretty much have exactly what we would need. And definitely personal finance is completely aligned to the financial literacy. And we may have to make some changes to technology applications for the computer science to add some stuff in, but we're waiting from the state to hear about that requirement and what exactly it entails. But at least the name change is there so that we're ready to go with it.
And that's all I had.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Colonian. Mr. Pearson, if you would like to make the motion on this and put in the comment about provisional on the yoga course, that might be helpful.
Okay, let me get to where I need to be in the agenda. So I'll make a motion to approve the Coventry High School course additions, changes, and modifications as presented. I guess with the caveat that we receive a legal opinion regarding the yoga class.
I second the motion.
Thank you. Before I call for the vote, are there any attendees that would like to comment on this particular agenda item?
There is no one.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. If we could, all in favor, you can just raise your hand. All right, looks like we have 3 yeas. Motion carries 3-0. Thank you, Mrs. Maycumber and Mrs. Ferguson, for attending and giving us that information. Sounds all worthy of, great changes. So thank you. Moving on to number 10, which is the Zero Trust Cybersecurity Initiative presentation and approval. Mr. Levis, I know you must want to start this, and then I see Mr. Longley is here as well.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, I want to thank Mr. Murphy and Mr. Longley. I know he's come before us, presented several times. I always thank Jay for helping us get through that horrific ransomware attack. I guess, based on what we've dealt with COVID, it really seems like nothing, but at the time, we didn't know how we were going to make payroll. And, with our finance department, payroll department that did an amazing job, in HR, Jay was very instrumental working with Jim to get us back. So, this connects to that. So I appreciate them coming before us. They're going to do a presentation, which I think you have. They'll discuss why this is important. And we're also going to ask you to allow us to utilize funds from the American Recovery Plan. We did reach out to, because I know this will be a question, we reach out to Rhode and found that, this would be an appropriate use of that. We have that documentation. So we've learned our lesson coming before you without getting that approval. So I will turn it over to Mr. Murphy and Mr. Longley.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. How are you tonight?
I'm good. It's nice to see you, Mr. Murphy. We hardly ever see you. You're just that Coventry back, that picture of the Coventry
Usually I
school.
keep in the background.
I agree.
All right. Let me know when you can see my screen.
We can.
Okay. So what we're coming before you tonight is to talk about what is called the Zero Trust Initiative. So back in 2019, which seems like it was 37 years ago, after our incident, we came before you guys and we did a presentation about how we were planning on remediating from the ransomware. Since then, we've completed many of the steps that we outlined in that presentation, and we actually came back before you last year to talk about a lot of this stuff. There are a few items that were left still open, and we did mention those last year when we spoke to you. So right now, we're kind of at a crossroads. We have this large influx of devices that's about to happen, and it's a good time to kind of take a look at these things and see if we can dovetail the two deployments together so that they make sense and so that we maximize safety. So you may be asking, what is Zero Trust? So I'm going to let Jay go into a little bit about the specifics on a lot of these things, but I think the best way to describe this is if you consider our school buildings right now, when you come into the building, we kind of assume that we can trust you. We're allowing you to be in here. We can trust what you're about to do. Zero Trust kind of takes a different stance on everything and kind of revokes the trust from everything and kind of makes people prove that they're trustworthy. It's kind of timely right now with what's going on with Russia and Ukraine and a lot of the threats that are, the saber rattling that's happening. The federal government's actually kind of talking about instituting Zero Trust across all of their systems as well. So it's really a system for identity management and threat protection and file protection. So I'll let Jay, you want to jump in here and kind of talk about a little bit about these things?
Absolutely. So thanks for having me back. I appreciate it, everybody. Great to see you all again. So zero trust, like Jim was talking about. Think of 2 years ago, 3 years, 4 years ago, right? You have a building. You have the four walls of the building. You've got a firewall at the entrance to it, virtually, and every computer behind there had antivirus and firewall on that, right? But any device that was in those four walls itself was considered trusted. If you logged onto the network at that point, you could get to the file server, you could get the information you needed to. You weren't challenged, you weren't monitored, you weren't necessarily authenticating, where you needed to. If you acted in a different manner than you normally did, there was no detection systems on there, right? So the whole world changed 2 years ago. Everybody went home, okay? There was still VPN accesses to schools, but now people are logging into the school, into the offices from their personal devices. Everybody's logging in using all these other devices. So the information before that was contained within those four walls is now on everybody's personal systems, is now on business systems. It's kind of scattered everywhere, right? So how do you get control over all of that information? And how do you make sure that you maintain ownership of it? Information sometimes is sensitive, including staffing information, student information, just regular business information, intellectual property, or it could just be day in, day out emails, right? So zero trust takes a methodology and a framework that we really started pushing forward pretty heavily about 3 or 4 years ago, and expands upon it, right? So what we do is we take that framework, we say, okay, we're going to overlay it across the entire system. Just because you're within the four walls of the school or the office or the building, even though you're protected by the firewall, we're going to look at the behavior of that system and make sure that it's working like it normally does. Does Jay normally go to this file server? Does he normally download this little bit of information? Does he work in this way, right? And if I start downloading tons of information, or if I start trying to log in from systems that aren't necessarily hadn't been trusted in the past, it's going to challenge me. So zero trust kind of wraps that framework around every endpoint instead of the four walls, of the office. It says we're going to treat every endpoint as potentially hostile. You have to prove that you're not. So it's going to know how I behave with the system. It's going to know how you behave with the system. It's going to know that you normally download these files, you interact with these different things, these different ways. And it's also going to protect the information regardless of your location. So no longer does it matter if it's in the four walls, right? You can have personal information or business information or school information sitting on a home computer, but the school can still own that information, right? So the technology is there. We had talked about it a couple of years ago, if a threat actor gets into the system and exfiltrates, takes information out of it, before we really had no recourse. You kind of go back and pull that information. Now, this gives us the ability to track the information or revoke access to it. So it gives us a lot more abilities with the information that's there, and there's a lot more framework that you can build upon. It touches on device management, which is the computers, the phones, the day in and day out devices that you work with. It adds the advanced threat protection on there, which monitors behaviors, monitors patterns, alerts a global system, and then reacts too. So if somebody in a different district, a different organization, in a different country can detect an anomaly, it alerts the system. Now you're protected from it too. So the data loss prevention, we've talked a little bit about that. And shadow IT discovery is a fun one. We can tell an environment, just trust these applications, just trust these computers, and if it's beyond that, you have to challenge yourself and prove who you are. So it helps with that. It discovers the things that aren't approved by the school system. It discovers the devices that aren't approved, the applications aren't approved, and it can alert, it can even block it. So it adds quite a bit to that overall security model. Questions? There's going to be just a handful of slides, and I can get very in depth, so I want to try to keep it high level instead of technical, but I'm here to answer whatever questions you have. So
He loves this topic.
I do. Yeah.
So what would zero trust look like for us? So like Jay said, there would be security wrapped around every endpoint. That's every phone, every computer, everything. All the devices and all the files will be encrypted, which kind of points back to a question that came up at the end of our last presentation about data protection on laptops and mobile devices. We'd be able to track and revoke access to that data. So one of the tactics right now is they'll encrypt your files like they did to us, but they'll also take your files, So they'll get you once to get your data decrypted, and then they'll say, okay, now we want some more, or we're going to dump your data publicly. So with this, we would be able to track and revoke access to that data. So if there were some event, then you could revoke access to the data, and that becomes mitigated. We'd be able to centrally manage and report on compliance policies. This kind of dovetails into discussions that are happening right now about what insurance companies are going to be looking for to maintain cybersecurity insurance. And the last part is the expansions will allow us to quickly provision the systems that we have coming in from the Emergency Connectivity Fund instead of manual operating system maintenance, installation of software and stuff like that.
Yeah, I want to dive a little bit deeper into the ability to track and revoke access to data. Well, we talked about it with a threat actor taking the data. This can be for anybody, right? So if you have staff that you part ways with, or a vendor that you no longer are working with, and they have your sensitive data, you can ask them for the data back in the past. You have no way to actually revoke access to it. So this framework, and these abilities allow you to track that data and revoke access to it. So it helps. There's also points in time where we do investigations with other schools and state police where information, had been sent to us by a bank, and it had a lot of other information from a lot of other companies contained within there. So that was unintentional on the bank's behalf during an investigation we did. And the bank didn't have the technology, so they didn't have the ability to revoke access to that data. So that became a reportable event, right? And we want to make sure that we remove as much reportability out of events and as much threats or potential data leakage as possible. The last point on there, the expansion to allow the ability to quickly provision systems. I think as Jim, and Craig had said earlier, you get a lot of new computers that will be, given out to the staff over the next couple of months. How do you quickly provision computers? How do you get the right software on it, the right security on it, and get it into the hands of your staff quickly and easily, right? And if you need to troubleshoot, or if you need to wipe the systems out and manually rebuild them like we did, 2.5 years ago, how do you do that, right? Right now it's manual. You go one by one by one by one. This framework allows us to say these computers have the security, these access, the end user goes over to the computer, they log on, the applications are automatically downloaded to them. Their files are given back to them. Everything's provisioned to them. So you can send out 100, 200, 400 computers, and the framework's there so that you don't have to go one by one provisioning that. So it's a framework that's able to scale into other areas of technology as well. So back to you, Jim.
All right. So again, what Mr. Levis mentioned is that we're asking you to assign some money from the American Recovery Plan to pay for this initiative. It will allow us, obviously, to keep our data in there for our students and staff and our families safer. And it will also lay the groundwork to better protect everything else that is inside the confines of the schools, like the HVAC systems, telephone systems, security camera systems, and so on and so forth. And that's about it. If you guys have any questions.
It's a topic I love to talk about, so hit me.
He does, it gives me heartburn.
Well, Mr. Pearson, would you have any questions? I know you must have something.
No, believe it or not, no, I don't think I have any questions. It's just a comment that it's good to see that we're continuing to move forward and enhance our security practices, so we don't run into, or we've reduced the likelihood we run into problems moving forward. It's as the news has come out over the past couple of years and all the cyber attacks experienced by municipalities and school districts, the theme was clear that government bodies are behind. They're behind the private sector in keeping up to date in these things, and it's what made us and other organizations and public bodies really ripe for attack from these cyber criminals. So anything we can do to, again, put together effective strategies to protect our data, protect our systems, all for it. I hope the town side is doing the same, because we share a financial system, and the last thing we need to do is have our financial system be vulnerable as well. So thank you for this presentation, and thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you. And I'm going to
Thank you,
echo that. I hope the town is as well. As a resident of Coventry, you know, I'm hoping that they're securing it as well. So
Thank you. Mrs. Colonian, anything?
No, I have no questions, but thank you for this is interesting. This interests me also. I'm kind of a geek when it comes to stuff like, especially being safe, and it's just so much can happen out there by just clicking on the wrong email, or it's amazing. And I'll tell you, every day in my company, I get one of those emails where they, oh, we're sharing a screen or sharing this with you, and you have to click the little fish because it's phishing.
Yep.
So I'm very familiar with those emails. I can pick them out like nothing.
Yep, we've got a little hook now.
Yeah. Yeah, same thing.
nice.
But I'm glad to hear that. So keep up the good work, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Colonian. Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I think that it's a small amount of money to pay to make us more secure. I have one question on Monday's meeting, the town council meeting. I was asked a question by one of the town council members, Kim Shockley, and she wanted to know, she said something. I didn't catch the whole thing because, again, Zoom is difficult sometimes. She said something about they had some kind of presentation as well about cybersecurity, and wanted to know if we were going to be changing our address from .net to something different like .org. And so I did say that I would ask, and so it was very fortuitous that this was being presented tonight. So I'm not.
Yeah, I was just saying, we discussed that. I know in one of my weekly updates to you, I explained or shared with you that we had worked with the Homeland Security. Jay and Jim connected us. We spent an entire day going through a survey to look at vulnerability. They, was no cost to us. This all ties into that. We're working with, the trust who provides our insurance, won't be providing cybersecurity insurance, or may not be providing at the end of this year. And so we need to put ourselves in a position. I think tonight's presentation was to really limit our vulnerability, right? And the need to go, like the last thing we want to do is to have to access the insurance. So there's a lot going behind the scenes. We're going to have to go back to the policy subcommittee. There are policies that we're going to need to, we discussed that at length. So this is just, it's important, it protects our students, it protects our staff, it protects our organization. As Mr. Pearson says, and anybody that's in, in the public sector working knows, the amount of resources. I can't imagine, Donna and, James, the amount of resources your companies allocate to this type of work. And, for us, to come forward and say we want 15 laptops in the past, it's like, well, I don't know if we can afford it, or, and now we need to be right along line with the private, the public sector in terms of the corporations. And so, Jay and Jim have done a phenomenal job. We'll get the results back to that survey we took, and they will not only help us improve the areas we need to improve, but they have a gentleman that'll come out and take a look at our facilities with the same type of lens for attack, not just a physical attack, but also how people can breach some of our systems. So we're very fortunate to have that opportunity. So this will be ongoing. We'll come back to you, give you an update. We'll come back to the committee to let you know, more about what we identified. It may be an executive session because of security, but we'll share the results of the survey with you. The gentleman that we worked with said he would come and support that. So there's a lot of work that's been going on since that infamous day. I think it was July 9th or something like July 16th. Anyway, we appreciate your support. I appreciate the support of Jim and our tech department and definitely at Vision with Jay. They've done a phenomenal job. So.
Thank you. Yeah, I believe they're talking about the .gov. They want
Maybe it's
all this,
.gov, yeah.
yeah, they
Yeah.
want all the cities, state, local, towns, schools to be .gov. So it's a migration process. Yeah, it's not going to be a
Right.
quick one. That's everybody's undergoing it or beginning to undergo it now. But Homeland
Yeah, it's a lot of
Security
work.
is becoming
Yeah, I
a great
bet.
partner, both on the cyber side and on the protective, personal physical security side too. In Homeland Security, that's what Mr. Levis was talking about. They've got a wealth of resources that we're going to leverage as much as possible. So,
Yeah, they've introduced a lot of new services that they're offering to municipalities for no charge. So
Ah,
they're really
nice.
dedicated to making sure, like a lot of the things that have been happening over the past 2.5 years or so are
mm.
less frequent.
Great to hear. And we're so appreciative of the work that both of you do. Are we ready to make a motion?
We are.
Okay,
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the use of $68,500 of ESSER 3 funds for Zero Trust Cybersecurity Initiative as presented/amended.
Second the motion.
thank you. And is there any attendee listening that would like to make a comment or have a question? Just please raise your hand and Mr. Murphy will bring you in.
No hands.
No hands. No hands, Bob. All right, all in favor, just raise your hand. Looks like 3-0, motion carries 3-0. Thank you very much, gentlemen, and we look forward to more initiatives.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your hard work. All right, moving on to agenda item number 11, which is the due from the fund balance from the town of Coventry discussion. Mr. Levis, did you want to
Yes.
start this?
Yeah, I'm going to take this one.
Okay.
So, last meeting, we had a lengthy discussion about a memo that I had put together to address concerns that I had as superintendent, but I think we should have as a school department pertaining to comments that were made, insinuations in the memo. One of those was about fund balance. And, since that time, we have tried to, and we discussed that we would try to have a meeting with the both finance departments. We had, and I think I indicated that night, we were going to ask Ms. Mangiarelli. She's offered to come because she has a historical perspective. We were going to ask Lori Robitaille across the street in the finance department to come because she also has a historical perspective as part of these conversations. And we wanted the auditors to be there. The auditors have the knowledge. We have received information from the previous auditors. We needed some information. Harold and Chris DeVerna had asked for information. And honestly, it's going to help. It's us helping them do the job because we would be able to pinpoint, based on information they have, exactly the amount of money, where that money is. The auditors told us they couldn't speak to us. As you know, we haven't received the information. Mr. Anderson did put in an APRA request to Mr. Gorham, did not hear, so he's pursuing the additional steps, which may, most likely includes going to the Attorney General's office, right? So I have a problem with that in general. That's just not transparency, right? The auditors, I was told by that the administration had said the auditors don't want to be part of this or get in the middle of it. Maybe they don't, but we've had conversations with them. They're more than willing to come to that meeting. It's important for them to come to that meeting. They said it wouldn't take long for them to pinpoint where the funds are. But as to Mr. Pearson's point about the audit, this is going to hold up the audit process. And I just want to be on the record. It's not us holding the audit up, right? I mean, we've asked for information. Again, it's not the first time we've asked for information, Ms. Patino, and it's been refused to us. So, I was hoping tonight to come forward when we put this on the agenda. My plan was to say, hey, there's a meeting that's going to take place. We should get to the bottom of this, but I'm not. We have taken steps to make sure that we've clarified with council, the information in the memo so that they have an accurate understanding, and I think we've taken the high road to do that. For me, at least my belief, this is in the council's hands now. I don't know what they're going to do. I'm still concerned about comments that were made on December 13th, but we want to get to the bottom of this. There are funds that are due to the school. We know that, that are owed to the school. I think we've rectified, the fact that we can use fund balance. It doesn't mean we're deficit spending. And so I just wanted to present tonight that we don't have a meeting set up. It needs to take place. They did offer something like, I believe, second week of February. But again, to Mr. Pearson's point, that's going to delay all this information that, the purpose of the audit and the performance audit also is to help support our requests and the needs of justify the needs of where we're at, as a school department and also the town. So, I'm concerned. I'm concerned that they're indicating that the auditors don't want to be there. When we know we've had conversations, Mr. DeVerna, Mr. Sands have both had conversations with the auditors, so they're willing to come to this meeting. And I said to Dr. Dixon, I won't support this meeting without the auditors being there. This is something that just needs to take place. And again, this is one of the issues we need to address. In good faith, we're going to move forward in the budget process, but the elephant in the room is if we can't receive data that we're entitled to, and if we can't work together, this is going to be a horrific budget season. And and again, this isn't a threat. I'll do everything but it's true. It's true that we have to come to some understanding. I mean, there were some strong insinuations made about our finance department, our school department, and that needs to be settled somehow. And this is a barrier right here, the do to, do from. So I wanted to bring that to the attention of the committee, of the public. Where we go, I'm hoping that a meeting will take place as we described with the appropriate players. I don't need to be part of that meeting. We just need the right people to be there and resolve this and move forward. And then we can attack one of the other disagreements, for the lack of a better term, that we have. So I don't know if there's any questions from the committee. I always resonate, and I'm not trying to put Mr. Pearson on the spot, but you always talk about, trying to take the high road. And I feel like, I need to get this out in the public, but I also need to stress genuinely the willingness to continue to move forward, right? Like there has to be sincere willingness on our part. And I do believe that we do have that willingness. We're willing to come to the table, to lay the facts out and to overcome this so we can work together, because unless the town and the schools work together, there will not be a budget. We've seen that in the past. It just doesn't happen. And we need to have an appropriate budget for this, for the schools and for the town, municipal side moving forward. So, I don't know what it's going to take. And I'm not trying to muddy the waters. I'm just trying to advocate for the truth moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Levis. Mr. Pearson, did you have any comments?
Take the high road till you can't take the high road anymore. But no, it's true. I don't think I have any further comments. Thank you for the update. I'm still optimistic. We will get through these issues and be on a better path moving forward. Sooner the better. But at the same time, I understand your frustration, because it's very difficult putting a budget together and going through the budget process when we're constantly in being put into a defensive posture. We shouldn't have to be put into a defensive posture. It's supposed to be a cooperation between the town and the school department to present a unified budget to the taxpayers. And I don't know, it's the challenge this year for some unspoken reason that we are facing this challenge. So thank you for continuing to work on this. Look forward to any kind of meetings we need to have.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Mrs. Colonian?
I don't have any questions. I'll tell you, Greg, you're a better person than I am because I would have taken the high road and been off of it like 6 months ago. So, so I got to give you credit for that.
Thank you, Mrs. Colonian. Yeah, I'm going to try to still believe that the administration on both sides of the street can work together to solve some of the questions the town council members had. So, settle some of the questions that the town financial director has, the town manager, but it has to get reconciled. And to try to go forward with an FY23 budget with this still lurking in the background is just not a good way for us to try to govern. And we need to definitely settle it so we can move forward. This is going to be a tough budget season anyway. So to have these underlying sort of innuendos flying back and forth and supposedly people saying that we're withholding information, we're not sending budget reports, we're not doing this, we're not doing that. And so the whole story has to come out. I'm not sure how that happens. I mean, as a school committee, we were hoping that the administration on both sides could work it out. If that's not going to be possible, then we do have to have some kind of joint meeting where we all sit there and just work it out. And that includes the town council members, us, and the administration on both sides of the street. So I'm looking forward to doing that, and it's really a shame that the audit hasn't been finished and that there seems to be this stonewalling in front of us. So I'm going to hope for the best. And I'm going to hope for the best on the budget process in general, because I think in order for people to be transparent on both sides for the FY23, we have to settle what's already out there. So I'm hopeful that will happen and we can move forward. Otherwise, there's going to be this continual uneasiness amongst the citizens saying, they can't seem to get their act together. Why should I approve anything in FY20 for the FY23 budget? And that will be a dangerous predicament for both sides. We won't get the funding we need if we are level funded and a budget doesn't pass. So it is imperative that we work together and get this settled and, provide some kind of united front and be able to, both sides, be able to publicly say that we're settled on all of this. And that, the new budget proposal for FY23 has been a transparent process that people can trust. So right now, I don't think there's a lot of trust out there in the community. So that needs to be built before the referendum happens, before an FY23 budget gets passed by the council. So I will, again, look forward to the reconciliation of this whole matter.
Madam Chair, I just want to say, though, that, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. So I watched the town council meeting the other night and some of the questions and, I think there still needs to be further clarification about roles and responsibilities of the council and the school committee. And I think that's not at my level, right? That's beyond, maybe it's Mr. Anderson and Mr. Gorham, but I just want to acknowledge Mr. Sands and Mr. DeVerna. They're putting several hours, a day, in average, I can say, to address some of the concerns that you presented and, like Dr. Dixon's email about, the reports that you saw. And we're trying to get some clarification and I'm not asking them to comply for compliance sake. We want to make sure that what we do is make sense. And, so we are doing, we're just not neglecting information. There's a lot of work behind the scenes that's been going on with all this information, trying to give, individuals that have asked questions, give them the right information. So we've been doing that, behind the scenes. And as, like I said, again, Mr. Pearson had brought up in terms of the charter, this is stuff that really the administration should be dealing with. I try to keep, I think it's my responsibility as superintendent to keep as much off your plate, not to keep you out of the know, but that's my responsibility. Just as it's Mr. Cowitt's job to try to keep things off of my plate. Some days he does better than others, honestly, but no, no, but seriously, right? So this is something that I'm not I don't like coming before you and having these conversations, but it's at the point where once it's public, right? And there's this insinuation that we don't know what we're doing. We've been mishandling money. We're deficit spending. And there's the word receivership was used. I feel like we need to make sure that we present this publicly. You know, and hopefully, like I said, that'll end. So but I wanted to thank Mr. Sands and Mr. DeVerner, and there's a lot of other people that are working behind the scenes. So, you know, we're not just neglecting this and putting our head in the sand by any means. We want to, you know, we're at the point where we're going to tackle it. We have been, I think, head on, you know, so I wanted to thank everybody that's been part of this.
I think the school committee understands that, and we thank all the parties involved in the school department trying to work through this problem. And I think you're right. There might be the need for legal counsel to try to do some professional development that basically says, this is the role of the school committee, this is the role of the town council, and this is the role of the administration working together in a transparent way. So I will be positive and hope that that will all happen. Before we move on, are there any citizens that would like to comment on this particular issue or have any questions?
I don't see anything.
I don't either, so I guess we can move on. Thank you, Mr. Murphy. We'll move on to the superintendent's report. So Craig, you're up again.
I'm going to punt the second one to Mr. Cowart.
Okay.
But the first one, the performance audit, I know we talked a little bit about it. I want to reiterate that I do believe the matrix group, Mr. Pennington, you know, there was concerns about a survey, just so you know that a survey was sent. And first, we read it, it didn't really address, I think, the needs of the school department. So worked with our team to revise the survey to make sure that it addressed the different populations. And they were very receptive. I gave feedback to Mr. Pennington, I believe, Tuesday. I submitted, I think, to him Tuesday afternoon. He told me that he'd have it back to us tonight for a final review or tomorrow morning. So they've been working with us. You know, I've expressed some concerns I've been brutally honest about the relationship between the schools and the town. I did share with him my memo because this is not a big kumbaya, you know, and I'm hopeful that they'll identify some areas or some strategies where we can come together. You know, we're in this, you know, we're 100%. I heard loud and clear to make sure that we're in this, we're doing our part. I believe we are doing our part. We're given whatever information is necessary. So I look forward to our steering committee meeting next Monday and to get an update, which we'll report out. And you know, again, I'm hoping that it highlights the areas that we do well and also highlights the areas that we need some, you know, improvement on. And part of that too could be the lack of resources, looking at our facilities, right? In an educational system, we know the value that, you know, we're struggling keeping people just, you know, forget, you know, warm and dry. Like we're throwing warm out the window almost every single day because we have break, even though we keep on investing. Some of our systems are from the 70s, some of the pieces. So, you know, I look forward to this and how we can utilize it to move forward and support our budget requests and support moving forward. So, you know, I think we've participated fully, and but we're far from, like I said, the part of the steering committee was to look at reports that they generate and to see are they aligned with the information we shared. You know, give feedback on that. And that we haven't been able to do that yet. So I think it's going to be, you know, I think originally we're talking about end of January, early February. I think that was what I heard in terms of, you know, coming up with information so we could benefit the budget process. I think it's going to be pushed out, you know, a few weeks. So anyways, but again, I do appreciate, and I want to say that I think Mr. Pennington and his team are going to be extremely objective, and I do want to support the process. So that's the performance audit. And then I would encourage everybody to look at our dashboard it's up to date to today. We have one more day, but I think you're going to see overall, there's some areas and some schools that have had some increase in certain population, but I think overall you're going to see significant over the last 4 weeks, a significant decrease. I do want to say though, it's still higher than it was a year ago, right? So while we're seeing this decrease, we also need to recognize that where we were a year ago, I think it's still higher, but our expectation is if we keep on this trajectory, we'll be in good shape, even with February vacation coming up. I think we're going to have a very positive spring. But I'll turn it over. Oh, the last thing I want to say, then I'm going to have Mr. Coward talk about a couple of things. Sorry, Don. We did receive 10,000 test kits. It happened, I think we received them yesterday. Long story, but the FEMA, you've probably heard where other districts or communities are just handing them out. There's specific strict guidelines. And, and again, I don't want to criticize other communities, but the guidelines basically say they can be like congregate care, group homes, schools, federally funded like senior, nursing homes. And so we're obviously as a school department, we have to come up with a way we can give them out to our students, our staff, the bus company, and we believe like the food service because they support the schools. But we need a plan. So we're going to come up with a plan over the next couple of days. And my plan would be to get them to staff. We feel we can hand them out to students 14 years and older, but younger students, we're going to have to hand them out to their families. So we're going to come up with a way where maybe after school, but school by school, parents can come up, we'll have lists, we'll be able to check off. We'll notify the parents when we're going to send them home. It won't happen until next Monday or Tuesday. But at least every kit has 2 tests in it. So again, supporting this, supporting families. We know how hard it is to get test kits. Even if you can get them reimbursed by your insurance, it's still challenging to get them. So just to let the community know, we appreciate from working with our EMA here in Coventry, and we'll be distributing those early next week. So Don, do you have anything you want to add to my?
No, I think you did a great job. So I'm going to speak a little bit about concurrent learning, but I wanted to kind of go back in time just a little bit to set the table so people know exactly where we were from, where we came from, and where we are now. So just to kind of remind you about the definition of concurrent learning, it's in Coventry, it's when kids join the classroom from home and through their Google Meet, and they participate in learning from home while the class is in live session in person at the school. Last year, some other districts used that for their for the entire year. We did not use that last year. We had dedicated teachers doing distance learning, and our dedicated teachers were responsible for teaching their kids on their team or in their classrooms. When the beginning of the year started, I met with Kelly Aronakis a number of times to talk about how we could maintain some instruction throughout the year. But one of the things we discussed was concurrent learning, but we had a concern. And one of the concerns we had from the very beginning is when we looked at what other districts experienced last year, one of the things they experienced was kids who were joining classrooms from home when they really could have and should have been in school. Meaning there was no criteria for being on concurrent learning. So you could just choose to be home. You would not be marked absent, you'd be marked virtually present, and you would join the class. And what we saw is in many neighboring communities, by the end of the year, with really no reason whatsoever, the number of kids in person was a very small percentage of the number of kids in the school. In some cases, under 25% of the kids were attending because there's really no guidelines around concurrent learning. So, but Kelly and I talked about it, and we saw that there was value in it, but we knew that we were going to have to put some parameters around it. So when Kelly and I met and talked about it, the things we discussed were things like, so who gets concurrent learning? What makes them eligible? So we talked about, if they get sent home by the school nurse as symptomatic, or if they test positive, they would be eligible for concurrent learning. And we would have to manage that because for them to join the classroom, they would need the Google Meet. We couldn't just post a Google Meet publicly or in a way that just any old student could join, because then we would be in the same situation that other districts are in. So we had these lists, who's on, who's off. So we had a management system for that. But then we also had to think about, you know, what made sense in terms of how the instruction would take place. So when you have kids joining from home, it's a very different experience than when they're all in the classroom. And for a short amount of time, we felt that if there were 2, 3, 4 kids at home and they were joining, the teacher would not have to do too much extra planning to get them to be able to just log in and participate. And I know for the average person, they think the student logs in and then everything is just like they're sitting there. But it's not, because classes are interactive. Classes are moving at a pace that's different than when the whole class is on DL and everybody's on the screen and everybody's getting the exact same experience. So teachers are putting kids into groups by moving devices to tables. Teachers have to worry about microphones and speakers so kids can hear what's happening in the room. They're designing lessons where kids who are home can interact with kids who are present. So we considered all these things from the very beginning, but we figured the numbers would be low and it would not be significantly, it wouldn't be too much of a hardship. And at the time, it was a 10-day quarantine, then it was a 7-day quarantine. So we said, you know, if a student is on a 10 or 7-day quarantine, we'll try to keep this in place so that kids don't miss instruction. So we had the best intentions. Since November, when things started going up, what we have seen happen across the district is the number of kids requiring concurrent learning jumped significantly, meaning that sometimes half the kids were in, half the kids were out. Sometimes 10 kids were in and 15 kids were out. And the teacher was trying to balance instruction with numbers that were really not realistic. And it was becoming a little bit of a challenge for them to maintain all of it. And in addition to all of that, with the younger kids in particular, not so much with the high school or middle school, but the younger kids, they're home, and there's also the distraction of them not knowing what to do, not understanding, and their parents popping in and asking questions, and the parents popping out, and then the little brother coming in and shutting the screen, and then the student has to log back in, the teacher has to accept them. Like all of these little things that happen in life, they're expected, but they impact the process. So when the Rhode changed the quarantine to 5 days, that shortened it from 7 to 5. The other thing they did is they put into place monitor to stay, which means if you don't have symptoms, you can stay in school. So we saw that the only kids that we were sending home were, at this point, now that we're in this new world, right, in January, the only kids we're sending home at this point are kids that are truly sick. They're symptomatic. If they're not symptomatic, they can stay in school until they become symptomatic. And so we have sick kids at home. So the good news is we don't have as many kids who are sent home because they're close contacts. The bad news is until this week, we had a lot of kids going out. Because it's a 5-day quarantine, it becomes sort of like a carousel of kids in and out, in and out, in and out. So instead of, you know, Johnny and Susie being home for 7 days and then coming back, it's like Johnny's in, Johnny's out, Susie's in, Billy's in, Susie's out, Johnny's in, and the teachers are having a hard time maintaining it. So much so that it's impacting in-person instruction as well. So the kids in person are having some difficulty. So Craig and I and Amy and Kelly and a few principals, we all kind of got together and started to discuss, like, where does concurrent learning sit with us right now? The other problem with concurrent learning is we have many parents who now feel that it's something they can request as a platform, even though the state has pretty much said that there's no DL platform, they request it for things that are not COVID related. So there's this belief in the community that concurrent learning is now this available option. So long story short, and I think it was important to give you the backstory, is we're moving to eliminate concurrent learning as it exists now. Kids will still have access to Google Classroom. They'll still get their assignments. They'll still be able to do the lessons that are available to them through their classroom. If they're younger kids, they'll still be able to pick up packets. Teachers will still check in on kids on a every other day basis. They'll talk to parents, they'll email, so there'll still be a connection with the school. but we're going to have to stop kids joining classrooms from home into school because it's impacting teachers, it's impacting learning, and it's becoming a little bit difficult to manage, to be honest with you. What we're hoping happens is now that our numbers are going down, the number of kids needing to get packets and assignments through Google Classroom will decrease, and concurrent learning can kind of sail away and kind of like be done. And then we can just handle it like we've always handled it when kids are homesick. When kids are homesick, they get assignments, and when they get assignments, they do them, and when they're done, they bring them in, and that's it. So we're trying to transition back to sort of where things were prior to the pandemic. So I don't think everyone's going to love this decision. I think some people are going to be indifferent. They're not going to care. I think some people are going to understand completely because they're going to say, yeah, that makes sense. I think some parents are going to say, well, I don't know if that's right. If the teacher's there teaching, why can't I join? But we are going to communicate to parents tomorrow what our thinking is, and we're going to communicate to teachers. And I wanted to make sure that I had an opportunity to explain it to you as well, so that you understood the reasoning why we were looking to make a shift or an adjustment. I'll take questions if you.
Can I just add, I just want to add that a couple of things. We surveyed other districts too, right? So we didn't just live in our little Coventry vacuum. We reached out to see what are other districts doing. Are they having the same, scenario, experience, right? And we found that most districts have stopped doing this a long time ago. The other part is
they actually, not to interrupt you, Craig, but they actually did not even start concurrent learning this year because of the struggle they had last year.
But we did. But we also recognize that, like I said, 5 days for most individuals, part of that time is over a weekend, right? So, and we also recognize where we are. Like I looked at, when we talk about numbers of positive cases, just last week we had 28 staff and 149 students that were positive. This week we have 8 staff and 73 students. Now we have one more day, but 4 weeks ago we had 55 staff and 258 students. So when you pull this all together, and this has been a conversation that's been taking place over a month, right? So when we were at 55 and 258, at least I know from my end, I said, I'm not willing to go there because we still have, so many kids going out. But the fact of the matter is, we've taken all this information. This has taken over a month to make this type of decision, and we will communicate it, but wanted Don to share with you. And and not for nothing, but when I hear it's a lot on adults or whatever, we're the adults, right? We really believe that, this isn't in the best interest for everyone right now. And so we'll deal with it if people have a problem. We also have been clear that if students have, disabilities and different needs, so we're going to treat them like we always do and provide the supports that they're entitled to, So, but again, we're not looking for long-term here. We're looking at, no more than 5 school days, and typically it falls, one of the days falls, or 2 of the days sometimes fall on a weekend. So it's 3 or 4 days for most individuals. So under normal conditions, we would just give them the work and support that.
And the way it's been going up to this point, because there's been so many kids in and out, is we say to parents, we have 24 hours to get you the link to join the meet and to get your Google Classroom set up, because sometimes kids test positive and we get notified at 5 o'clock at night, and parents are expecting to jump on 8 o'clock in the morning, and the teacher's not ready for that. And so we asked them to just give us a school day to get that in place. So it usually does take a school day to get that in place. So now we're talking about students who are on a 5-day quarantine. They're jumping on the second day, and then they're coming off almost as soon as they're going on. And then, like I just said earlier, it just is becoming a little bit disruptive to the flow of the instruction, because of how it's not fluid in a way that's beneficial to all the participants, if that makes sense. I'll take questions on it because there may be some here.
Thank you. I appreciate the backstory, and gives us a good inkling as to what's really going on in our classrooms. Mr. Pearson, do you have any questions for Mr. Coward or Mr. Levis?
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Kalunian?
I agree with you, Don. My son, and my daughter-in-law are teachers in Connecticut, and they said that they went through the concurrent learning last year. Their school did not put that in place this year at all, but they said the behavior problems that they had in the beginning of the year, because kids spent a whole year just not interacting with each other and, not sitting in a classroom. So it was tough. And I think that you doing this is, it's going to be better for the children. They really, they're going to
Yeah.
need to get back in. And
It's kind of the Band-Aid approach, unfortunately, because there's no other way to do it. We kind of just have to rip it off. And I do
Yeah.
really feel like it begins to transition back to what we have always done traditionally when kids are out. Because what we can't have is this long-term concurrent learning option that people want to use when they're on vacation, or people want to use when they have the stomach bug, or people want to use when they are, I don't know, just pick a thing. You know what I mean? It's just, it's evolving, because those are the kinds of requests we're getting now.
I agree.
We're going away. Can we have the link to the classroom so when he's on the plane, he can join the class? Like, that's not really the intent here. And so we just need to get a handle on it. And unfortunately, this Band-Aid approach is going to be a little bumpy for some, but I think it just has to happen.
No, and I totally agree with you. I think, we need to get back to life, and the kids need to get back in school, in classrooms, and, that's the best way they'll learn. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mrs. Clooney. And I don't have any questions. I think you're making the right decision. I think this committee is in support of the decision. And I know, like you say, it may be a little bumpy, but it has to get done. It's the only sensible thing to do. And I commend the efforts that have already taken place. I do think you're right in the sense that the public, parents think it's sort of like, oh, it's just not a big deal. Just, it's kind of like magic, just do it. And, it'll be convenient and there's no repercussions or problems for the in-person classroom. Never mind the child that's at home trying to do their work. And so I think you've done your homework. You've, looked at other districts. You've seen the data. You've listened to people. You're not doing this, just for some kind of, half-hearted reason. I think the reasons are very well thought out and well put together. And I think you have this committee support. And we will, any parents that do in fact reach out to us, we will definitely send them to, your way. And I'm sure you'll be able to figure out what needs to be done and said to them. Before we move on to citizens' comments, or maybe we can combine it. Are there any citizens in the audience that would like to ask any questions about the superintendent's report, the concurrent learning, or any other thing that they may want to ask?
We don't have any takers.
I don't see anybody, so thank you, Mr. Murphy. Then I think we can schedule the next meeting. And Mr. Levis, should we schedule the next one as next Wednesday?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so the next Wednesday, I believe, is the 2nd,
Yes.
February 2nd. So could we have a motion to schedule our next meeting on February 2nd, which will be a budget workshop at 6 o'clock?
Okay, Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to schedule the next meeting on February 2nd at 6 p.m. virtually. Will this be virtual?
I don't think I think we have till the 8th. I'm not sure what'll happen after the 8th. Correct? Is that what the governor had said? Okay to.
I believe the
it was-
executive order, goes to
Yeah,
the.
February 8th, yeah.
Okay, let me start again. To schedule
Sorry.
I'm going to make a motion to schedule the next meeting for February 2nd, 2022 at 6 p.m. virtually for the budget workshop.
I second the motion.
Thank you. And can we just have a show of hands, all in favor? Looks like it carries 3-0. And I have 8:14. Could I have a motion to adjourn, please?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting at 8:14.
Second the motion.
Thank you. And just a show of hands. Looks like we have 3 yays, so we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance. Thank you for the public attendees, and we will see you soon, next Wednesday. Thank you all. Have a